All right, let's begin. Welcome everybody to Friday. Yay, Friday. So we're going to continue our discussion from Wednesday, and this is a very topical topic as far as these things go. So, is your students in CSI 40 taking calculus right now? They probably should be. Not every college requires calculus for computer science majors, but it's probably a good idea to take it. There's, not a lot of calculus as far as like actually needing calculus to do most programs. The trig, yeah, algebra for sure. Linear algebra, which is like algebra, but more variables, really, is super important. Calculus, 15% of the time it matters 100% of the time. Let's put it that way. There's a fraction of positions where you kind of have to know, integrals and derivatives and things like that. But in general, it's considered just good for you to know it because it teaches you how to think about things like quantization and, trying to approximate a curve by kind of moving along it by iterating a little bit to the right and a little bit up and stuff like that. So it's probably good for you, even if you don't use it. If you go up to Calculus 2, taking another upper CSI class, just use 5% of it. Yeah. In all honesty, I used third quarter calculus once to do like partial derivatives and things like that. Like I was trying to figure out like I was making a virtual reality game, and as you do. And the question was, if you drop a ball on the world, there's a landscape. Which way does the ball roll? I was sitting there trying to figure it out, and then I went to lecture, and they're like, "Hey, here's this thing called a partial derivative, and it's useful if you ever drop a ball on a slope." I'm like, "Wow, that's actually what I'm doing right now in my job. That's really topical and useful." And so I was able to use my calculus knowledge to solve the problem that I was like trying to derive myself, basically. Do you teach next levels at FSU? I don't. I teach the full set of classes at Clovis Community College, and they all transfer between Fresno State and Clovis. So I actually have quite a few Fresno State students in my classes. A lot of times because the Fresno State classes fill up, and so they just send their students over to me, and I add everybody. I'm kind of an idiot like that. As long as the fire marshal doesn't shut me down, I basically add every person. Although, at some point there's like probably a physical limit, but like I've had students sitting on the counters and stuff like that. So, I'm like, just wedge yourself in somewhere. They'll pull in folding tables and stuff for people to sit at. Okay, so. So the social issue we're talking about right now is censorship, specifically in regards to, you want, well, thank you. There's nothing stopping you from taking computer science if you're interested in it at Clovis. Like it's just up the street from Fresno State, and people go back and forth all the time. So, So just take it at Clovis. Like, there's no downside to it. And there's always Discord, and you can stay on Discord too as well. So censorship. So censorship technically is a government action. So things are censored when the government says you cannot say that in public. That's censorship. And so when there was all this discussion, for example, by Trump saying he was being censored on Twitter, which it depends on your perspective, right? Because like he's the leader of the free world, and Twitter's like, you violated our terms of service and deleted his access to tweet things, and that technically is not censorship because it was not a governmental action. In fact, the opposite took place. The Supreme Court ruled that Trump can't block people on Twitter that are saying bad things about him because that counts as censorship, which is an odd thing, right? Like you think, right? Like you go onto social media, you say something, people curse at you, you block them. Nope, can't do that if you're the president. That is illegal censorship, according to the Supreme Court, which makes you kind of like curious what was said in court that day. Like, did they read mean tweets? Like, that would have been pretty funny. You know, XX Smoke Buds 420 XX said to President Trump, "Yo, dog, you're a moron." End quote. You know, and it would have been a fascinating thing to sit in on. I just wanted to see that in real life, but alas, it was not to be. So, yeah, and in some countries, like, there's actually serious government censorship. Like in Thailand, they have what's called a lèse majesty law, which means you cannot say anything that reduces the majesty of the king. So if you point your shoe at the king, that's an arrestable offense. Don't point your feet at people in general in Thailand, I guess. But if you point at the king, you know, that's bad. And if the newspapers say anything about the king, they can get arrested or fined and stuff. So, but when corporations do it, it's not censorship because it's not governments doing it, and they have the legal right to do so, and sometimes they're obligated to do so. In Germany, if you are an online corporation, you have to remove speech that is indecent, offensive, blasphemous, or anti-constitutional, which means oftentimes Nazi stuff. So if somebody, for example, teaches their dog to do the Hail Hitler thing with his paw, which happened, the dude got arrested for it because it's against the law. They don't have a constitutional right to free speech in Germany the way that we do in America. And so, you know, if you play World of Warcraft in different countries, you will see that, like, the Forsaken, the undead race in World of Warcraft, is censored in China because bones are considered indecent. And so every country has its own kind of views on stuff. And so the governments force corporations to do their censorship for them. And whether or not that's considered censorship depends on which country you're in. In America, that would technically be considered a violation of the free speech if the U.S. Congress required that World of Warcraft didn't show any blood in it or something, which is a thing like in some countries, like showing blood and gore. I think Australia and Germany have laws against blood in video games. In America, that would be considered a violation of free speech. That the government cannot compel a corporation to say or not say things. Okay. So, what the F, this word has been censored for the safety of the user is random JK. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that does sometimes lead to hilarious things. Like the government, you know, might require you to remove offensive or blasphemous words. And so blasphemous to what religion? Right? Because blasphemous means that you're saying something against God, right? Well, which God, you know, and why should that religion be privileged? Well, in Europe, there are still state religions, and so, you know, if you're saying something against the majesty of God, you're essentially going up against the state, and you know, because they have state religions in Europe, that's a thing. So, TikTok censoring cat videos, yeah. Yeah, and there are hilarious results too when they try like implementing curse word filters and things like that. There is I ran into that recently, where like some substring of the word that I was typing matched like a curse word. So there's a town in England called Scunthorpe, and it's a town of 82,000 people. And a lot of the people can't put the name of their town in online services. I will allow you to use your powers of critical thinking to figure out what word the online services are filtering on, and they do a substring match, and so it finds the word anywhere within the word and blocks them from saying it. So you've got an issue where a town of 82,000 people can't say where they're from, right? You know, it's Internet Obscenity filters, yeah. The Scunthorpe problem is the unintentional blocking of websites because they contain a string or substring that appear to be obscene. Yeah, and this actually happened to me. Not from Scunthorpe, of course, but oh man, what was it like? I don't remember which word it was, but I probably couldn't say it in front of an impressionable group of youth anyway. But yeah, I was like typing in some completely inoffensive word, and there was like a substring that matched on it. Or YouTube demonetizing a bunch of videos. Yeah. And that's really what we're talking about today, right? So like, YouTube's like, well, we're not censoring them. We're just demonetizing them, right? Well, why? Well, it violated our moral principles. Which from a corporation is kind of amusing, right? Because I don't really consider Google to have a set of like morals as such. More like a desire to avoid pissing off too much of the world, right? And so if if somebody says something that would annoy large numbers of people, then Google tends to look down on it, and a lot of times people get demonetized and things like that. But so that's a question. Like, and so for those of you online, the question is, but isn't that censoring them? And the answer is, depends on the definition of the word, because it's technically not censorship. If Google just chooses that like Republicans can't post any YouTube videos, they can do that. They're a private corporation. The First Amendment does not apply to corporations. It applies to the government. The government cannot delete Republican videos on YouTube. But if Google wanted to, they could. They'd face a PR issue, and there would be sort of political pressure if they did so. But they could do it. It would be illegal for them to do it because the First Amendment does not apply to corporations. Do you guys understand the difference? But a lot of times we call it censorship because they're essentially censoring things. And so I call it corporate censorship. So when a corporation censors things that they don't like, I call that corporate censorship to keep it separate from censorship, which is technically a governmental issue. Right. Yeah, exactly, Thomas. So don't use the F word, you get demonetized. Right. Yeah, and it's completely arbitrary, right? Like, why should, like, if I was let's say that I was getting paid to make YouTube videos, right? Technically I am, but I don't get paid by YouTube. None of my stuff is monetized. But let's say this was my job and I was getting paid through, clicks and things like that. I don't understand why YouTube would be able to write me a check if I said one bad word, and they couldn't write me a check if I said another. What is the ethical principle there? What's the moral principle there? And again, I think it's just a matter of they want to present a certain image, and if somebody was, too off the wall, then they demonetize them so they don't get paid for cursing. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure if even they have like a ethical or rational basis for any of it. I think it's just they're just kind of making it up as they go along, and that's kind of the feeling that I get from all this Facebook insider stuff, is that they really don't know what they're doing either. Like Google has, why do I keep saying Google? Facebook has 1 billion people using it, and the takeaway that I got from all this stuff is that they don't know what they're doing. Like, I mean, from a technical sense, they do, right? Like, if you've seen Mark Zuckerberg talk, there's recorded lectures like from back in the day before he became the Mark Zuckerberg. He visited Harvard, a couple of years after he founded Facebook, and he was a moderately successful person at that time, but not like one of the richest people in the world. And he knew all the technical issues really, really well. Like, if you watch his talk at Harvard, like he wanted to talk about servers, and people didn't. And it was really funny because it's like Zuckerberg's talking in your class, and everyone's just sitting there like. There's just like people sleeping in the audience. It's a very sparsely populated lecture. There's people just like tapping away on their laptops, like, who is this guy? He's a Harvard alumni. He's coming back to talk. Okay, whatever. And there's like 75% of the lecture was just empty. It was really funny to watch. But what he wanted to talk about was the tech issues, and that's something that this book that I'm reading right now called System Error talks about a lot. It's like we're really good. We, as in techie people, we're really good at solving like technical problems. Like let's scale it up. But we don't think about what happens if we take our system and scale it up so that there's now 1 billion people on it. And that's something that the insider leak is like, they don't know either. Like, okay, so people are using Facebook to commit genocide, which is true, actually, right? Or allegedly true. I mean, I don't know. Right? So, that's the thing. And the takeaway is that they're like, oh, oops, they didn't think about it, and then there's this tendency in corporations, like when people make a big fuss about them, that kind of motivates them to do stuff. And so like when people start talking about Facebook encouraging genocide, like they're like, that's not a good look. Let's try to do something about that, and they're very reactive because their default mode, especially in Facebook, is like I talked about last time. Zuckerberg wants to turn that dial up and get more people onto Facebook. That's his overall number one system priority, right? Whoever programmed Zuckerberg, I'm kidding. Look, he's a very well-designed android. I'm kidding. He's actually a really smart guy, and that's something that a lot of people don't get, is that Zuckerberg is actually like a nerd. Like, he's not like Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was a marketing guy who happened to pair up with a super nerd, Steve Wozniak. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, gets all the credit for Apple. He had no technical skills. Whenever he guided a technical project, it was a disaster. But Zuckerberg's actually a nerd's nerd. And the problem is not the technical side of things. They got Facebook working, which is I don't know if you know how hard it is actually to get a website working with 1 billion people on it that can all talk to each other, right? That's actually a really hard problem to solve, because all 1 billion people could feasibly interact with all other 1 billion people. So that's 1 billion times 1 billion interactions possible. And so whenever you do a search, like you're searching for 1 billion people, but you want to prioritize the people that are probably like one hop away from you in the social network. Like if I'm trying to find somebody that's not my friend, search through my friends, then search through my friend's friends, and search through my friend's friend's friends. And by the time you're like 3 levels out, you're talking about 1 billion people, or something like that. So, yeah. And so, but the point is, the techie's goal is always optimization and always trying to solve these hard technical problems. And they succeeded. And that's something that I don't think people give Zuckerberg as the figurehead, but really the team at Facebook, enough credit for. It's actually a really hard problem to build a social network that has 1 billion people on it. If you look at all the troubles Twitter had, as it scaled up, like, it's a hard problem. And the social side of things just are very much a secondary issue until people start being like, yo, you're causing a genocide. Oh, okay, maybe we should do something about that. And so Facebook at various times has implemented different teams to like try to minimize the bad press they're getting, more or less. Let's put some safety measures in place so we can't genocide people anymore. People are concerned that we're influencing elections. Let's put some things on it. Let's slap some band-aids on it, and maybe they'll not sue us or shut us down. So, it's actually a hard problem. Amazon, like, people don't understand. Like, it's really easy to hate on Jeff Bezos, and to be fair, he made he took his money and used it to build a penis-shaped rocket. The jokes kind of write themselves. You know what I mean? But like people don't give Bezos enough credit, and the team at Amazon, which includes people in my social network, right? Just how hard it is to do Amazon, right? Like people don't understand it. Like they think, oh, it's just an online store. Do you know how hard it is to do distribution of a billion different goods and have it available oftentimes same day or next day delivery for basically every product known to man? Like that is a really hard problem. It's a really, really hard problem. FedEx, the creation of FedEx was equally a monumental and almost impossible task to do next day delivery of mail, basically anywhere in America, except in Alaska, as I found out to my detriment. It's like putting together these networks. It's a really, really hard technical task. And then Amazon implemented like cloud computing, and that's just changed the world as well. They were the pioneers in cloud computing, and people don't understand how important that was also. And so as easy it is to hate on Zuckerberg and Bezos and things like that, like, and their teams, it's really a monumental technical achievement. It really is, and I'm not being sarcastic here in the slightest. It's an amazing achievement. But question: what happens when Facebook has a billion people on it? Should we? Jurassic Park. They were so interested in if they could, they didn't stop to think about if they should. And so the whistleblower said there were all these safety measures put into place for the election, and when the election was over, they removed them because they were hampering growth. And this is something that we see from insiders at Facebook over and over again. Like they'll be like, all right, we need to hire people to stop the negative impact of Facebook, and then the people are like, yo, you need to not do this, and then they get fired because it's hampering growth. Like there's a tension between growing Facebook and like safety issues, right? And growing Facebook tends to win, except when attention is put on them. So the workers are overworked. The whole peeing in a bottle thing. I mean, we've all been there. What caused the genocide part? Look up Facebook Myanmar genocide. You can read articles on it. I'm not familiar enough with it to lecture on it. So corporate censorship is legal, right? When Facebook shut down the Stop the Steal groups on Facebook, which was a bunch of people who believed that Trump somehow won the last election, right? So people put together these groups that were opposed to this kind of odd notion that Biden somehow stole the election. Facebook closed them down, right? And they were in the process of organizing the January 6th protests. They were not a riot yet, they were just protests. And so a lot of people got angry at them, right? Because this is like political expression. And, Facebook was very much like, nope, we're not allowing this political expression on our platform. So, does that violate campaign finance laws? I don't know, probably not, but it certainly irritated politicians. And if you look at the number of times, like our tech leaders, like the head of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, Zuckerberg, Tim Cook from Apple, if you look at the number of times they've been called in front of Congress over the last 2 or 3 years, it's like a lot. Like it's a big issue in our society, is like, to what extent does tech impact our society, the point of this class, and what should we do about it? And this is going to be your next discussion forum. Is like, how does tech impact our society in positive and negative ways, and what should be done about it, if anything? That's going to be your next prompt. Okay. So if you were a Congress critter, if you were a member of Congress, a representative or senator or something, you have the ability to write laws that maybe can get passed. What would you do? There's a variety of different ideas on the subject. One of which is leave them alone, laissez-faire, right? It's not the right of Congress to interfere, with free speech. Republicans have been talking a lot about getting rid of some protections for Facebook and social media in general, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then Democrats want to regulate Facebook in terms of like limiting the harm that it can cause, or the purported harm that it could cause, right? Because the 1/6 riots were organized in part on Facebook, and so they want Facebook to face responsibility for that. So very different takes on the subject, and everyone knows there's a problem and something has to be done, but nobody agrees on what or what the problem is exactly. You know, Trump's problem was that Twitter censored him, right? Corporate censored him. You know, they warned him, and then they banned his account. And Facebook also kicked Trump off Facebook. And Trump was like, "Look, you're engaging in viewpoint discrimination," and so that's something that Republicans have been talking a lot about, like prohibiting viewpoint discrimination in social media networks. And in fact, I think in Texas and Florida, I could be wrong though, it might be one or both or neither, but I think in Texas and Florida that viewpoint discrimination is now illegal. You cannot discriminate against somebody simply because they are Republican or Democrat if you're a social media network. And that's an interesting take, because like, how do you prove it? You know, because like, you know, the social media networks would be like, "Look, we're stopping a conspiracy theory. You know, stop the steal is a conspiracy theory that Joe Biden somehow lost. We're stopping a conspiracy theory. It has nothing to do with them being right wing or left wing." You know, and then you know the Republicans came back and said, "Look, all these groups there's a lot of conspiracy theories on the internet, and you're banning the right wing ones." You know, so that is viewpoint discrimination. So it becomes a really thorny issue of like, how do you prove it? You know, because you can always find something to ban people for. You know, like Reddit banned the Donald, which was Trump's campaign sort of perpetual campaign rally place on Reddit. They banned the Donald basically under flimsy pretenses. Like they just didn't like the fact that it was one of the most active subreddits on Reddit. And so there were leaked conversations with the admins of Reddit, and they're just all talking about different ways they can sort of fabricate reasons to get rid of the Donald. And the head of Reddit wasn't like really on board with it, but then a year later they quarantined the Donald, and then a year later they ban it. You know, and but like, how do you prove that they did that? They did that under viewpoint discrimination versus the fact it was violating the rules of Reddit. Because when you have an active subreddit, there's going to be people on there saying racist stuff, you know, dumb stuff. It's the internet. You know what I mean? So you'd be like, look, we documented 50,000 different cases of racism and sexism and whatever isms you want. So their moderators didn't take care of it, so we banned them. You know, well, you know, okay. Then every subreddit should be banned, you know, because you can find people saying dumb stuff everywhere, you know. So it's a tricky, you know, yeah, go to the next state and go back. Yeah, it's you know, state level regulation of the internet seems kind of dumb to me, honestly. So, what about disinformation? Yeah, great question. Great question. That's a big thing. After Trump's election, there was a significant reappraisal of the internet by Democrats, because Obama was elected in part because his campaign was tech savvy. In fact, my best man at my wedding, his sister worked for the Obama White House as an intern, you know, and everyone there, you know, Obama was famously on his BlackBerry 24/7, and they ran a more internet savvy campaign than McCain and Romney, and the internet was okay then, but then when Trump won in 2016, which blew everyone's minds because nobody saw that coming, then all of a sudden the internet was the problem. And it went from like, you know, look at how smart and tech savvy Democrats are, to like, you know, tech savvy Republicans. No, that's not the reason. They won because of disinformation, you know, and so they blamed Russia. And to be fair, I do think that I think Russia spent like $30,000 or $40,000 on advertising on disinformation and stuff like that, which, you know, is a thing, but at the same time is not a very large thing in terms of like impact and things like that. So, Kearney, no, I don't know Obama. I was invited to his inauguration, which was kind of interesting. It's not like I, know the guy. And I was tempted to go, like I thought it was an Arab, and it was a legitimate invitation to the inaugural ball. But, so I looked into it, and there's not just like one inaugural ball. Because if there was, I would have gone. Like, I don't even care. Like, I got to work. Who cares? I'm invited to the inaugural ball for the President of the United States. I'm going to go. As it turns out, there's like 40 of them. And so on inauguration night or whatever it is, Obama dips from one place to the other. And he spends like 5 minutes. Hello, hi, everyone. And he shakes the big donor's hands and then bails. And so there's certain inaugural balls that he actually spends time at, and that's for the high muckety mucks. And I was reasonably confident that if they had invited me in error to an inaugural ball for Obama, that it wouldn't be one of those. And so I'm like, it's not worth missing work and taking a flight. Although, it could have been fun. Yeah. Wearing a purple shirt. Yeah, you can't tell this is purple? Yeah. So it's a hard question, right? And so what determines if something is disinformation? That's another big question. Like look at the COVID issue, right? There have been a number of stupid things said about COVID over the past year and a half, right? And Facebook will tag things about vaccines with like, it seems like you're talking about vaccines. Click here for more information. So that's one approach Facebook's taken, which is just to tag things, and that's annoying, but I think reasonably harmless. Bigger issues if they start deleting things, like if they give you a strike because like YouTube was like I believe YouTube actually deleted a video by the guy who made ivermectin. That ivermectin, sorry. COVID-19 medical misinformation policy doesn't allow content that spreads medical information that contradicts local health authorities or WHO. So, if you're posting content, yeah. So there's all sorts of things that will get you deleted and copyright struck, right? And notably, YouTube, I'm not claiming any of these are true. I'm just noting this is corporate censorship, right? If you're deleting videos for these reasons, then you're engaged in corporate censorship. If your content violates policy, we remove it, right? It's harsher than Facebook's. Facebook just tags it. YouTube will delete it, and they'll ban your channel if you do it too much. So, I was a businessman doing business. That's funny. You still would have gone. Yeah, I don't like it. It's like DC in winter, Like, I don't know if you guys have been to DC before in January. It's not a pleasant place. Like, it's legitimately like freezing, and there's usually a little bit of snow on the ground. I don't know. Like, maybe I should have gone. But, yeah, and so, there's another consideration, which is that social media has now become sort of the public sphere for discourse. People talk to each other. Like I talk to my friends on social media more. I mean, I use text and phone and email, I guess, technically, and but like sort of like Facebook's just kind of a common place where, like, when I need to organize going to an SCA event with my friends, we form a little chat channel, and we're like, all right, who's bringing the barbecue, and who's bringing the water, and it's just the place where people talk, and if you start censoring people based on their political alignment, now you're going to have a big impact on politics, which is probably the point, right? Like, if you can get people of the other political persuasion kicked off or silenced or shadow banned or minimized, where like, over the years politicians have discovered like their tweets aren't reaching, or on Facebook they'll post on Facebook and it has no engagement, and so Facebook will silently like filter your post so people don't see it. There's a lot, like Tulsi Gabbard sued Google for oops, didn't mean to, blocking her, during her presidential run. She was running for the Democratic nomination. And so she goes on a presidential debate, and then Google blocks her from advertising on it. Right? Like, does that impact the political process? Probably. Would she have won anyway? Probably not. But that's a thing. We're in a world now where like Google is like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, sources of like spending ads, and if you don't allow certain political candidates to advertise on you, then you're putting your finger on you're influencing American politics, right? Which might be the point. I don't know. And Google just said, "Oh, it was a mistake." Google has denied any nefarious reasoning. It has automated systems to flag unusual activity. So, just oops, And to be fair, as a computer science person, oops do happen. At the same time, the way that Google deletes videos is shady AF. That is stopping freedom of speech. It is. Like if you allow certain people to advertise and not others, like that's interfering with the political process. And I don't know if that violates campaign finance laws. I'm not a lawyer, but it's pretty obvious that it does. And like Google, Facebook, not Facebook, YouTube, which is owned by Google, right? If they delete your video for a copyright strike, the system's actually pretty good. It'll tell you from this moment to this moment, you were playing copyrighted music in your video. Do you want to mute it, delete it, or give the monetization of your video to the person whose music you used without authorization, or dispute it? It's actually a pretty well designed system. I have no issues with it. I have a friend that works at Google who works on the music side of things. Like when you ask Google to play you a random song, that was him. That's his code. And that's not what happens though in these cases. So like when Rand Paul's account was suspended or deleted, Tulsi Gabbard's, a lot of and it happened to me once too. It just says your video, like they don't give you any explanation, they don't give you any appeal. And so what happens is that like Tulsi Gabbard sued Google, and then they're like, oh, it was a mistake. If you're a random person, you would have no ability to appeal that decision, right? What happened to me was I uploaded a video on hash tables, which is a topic in second semester computer science, and it was up for a day or two, and then Google deleted it, and they said this video violates our laws. No explanation. It cannot be appealed. This deletion cannot be appealed. You have violated our laws, and just removed it after people had been watching it, and they're doing the homework assignment based on it, and they're taking the quiz, and all of a sudden the video just goes offline because Google just decided that hash tables were not going to happen on my watch. Damn it. Utterly uncontroversial topic. Utterly uncontroversial. Like this topic is probably far more controversial than talking about hash tables, and they delete it with no explanation, no reason why, no copyright strike. And my friend at Google's like, I'm sorry that happened to you. You probably had a copy. No, there's no copyright strike. I've seen copyright strikes before. Somebody plays music behind me and Google picks it up and copyright strikes me. I've seen that before. The interface for that's fine. I'll just delete out the section of video, and who cares if it doesn't make sense or not? I don't care. This wasn't a copyright strike. They just deleted it, retroactively deleted it 2 days after it uploaded with no explanation and a note saying you cannot appeal this decision. And that's, to me, pretty shady. Like, that is... that's a very shady thing to do. Like, why? Why did you delete it? Give me some transparency here. Give me somebody I can talk to. And of course that's why they don't allow it, because then they would have to hire 9 million people just to field the calls from people whose videos they delete through automated deletion systems. And so what the appeal process has become for Google is like people file lawsuits against them. They get Congress to get involved. Like, why did you block Rand Paul's account? Call him into, call the head of Google into Congress to testify. Then, magically the account's working in. I'm sorry, it was just a mistake on our part. And, I'm not even implying it's nefarious or anything. It probably actually was, probably a 75% chance that, a senator's account got picked up accidentally by filters they wrote badly. But there's been a whole lot of these like, oops, sorry, it was just a bug, kind of things. We're going to have real world consequences, and people can appeal, and they're unfortunately not senators or people running for president of the United States, and they don't have any ability to get it overturned. And it's a very bizarre system where the appeal on your account ban is the United States Congress. Like, that's just a weird ass system. Like, all right, what's your first step? Check to see if there's a link on the email you got. Nope. Second step, go to Congress and get the head of YouTube to come in and explain themselves. Oh, look, my account got reinstated. Thank you, Congress. Like, why? What? How is... Yeah. Your friend at Google. No, he didn't know why. Yeah. It's like, that's weird. I had screenshotted it for him. Here you go. This is what I'm seeing. He's like, I've never seen that before. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. And so what I did was I just re-uploaded the video. Same video. No problems. It's been up ever since. I just re-uploaded it. I'm like, okay. I don't know what's going on there, Google. But people exploit the system. Like, there are internet trolls that will sit there and flag videos, right? Like, if there's somebody who's politically opposed to you, what you do is you get a group of like 50 or 60 of your friends together, and you flag a post as inappropriate, and then automated systems will be like, gone, right? And I don't think that happened to me, because honestly, who cares about hash tables? It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that really gets trolls worked up. Oh no, we can't talk about data structures on the internet. Because he was running for governor, the error was fixed. Yeah. And so you just and so there's like people that exploit these automated spam removal systems and things like that, and it's a problem, so sure, they delete distasteful groups, okay, but like there's what if it happens to your group? It's a slippery slope argument. It's fine when it happens to people you don't like, but what happens if it happens to you? Then you have to think about it. Like, should there be laws against this? Should there be laws against viewpoint discrimination? Should Google need to explain? Explainable AI is a very hot topic right now. And the notion of that is that anytime a bot does something like deleting, Attack on Titan, nice. Anytime a bot does something, there should be an ability to query the AI and find out why it made its decision. In the EU, if you use AI to like do loan approvals and things like that, the AI needs to be able to explain why the person didn't get a loan. And if you've never studied AI before, you don't understand how hard that is. Because most of the time when we do AI, we just throw spaghetti at the wall and see which one is the most accurate. So we have no idea what it's picking up on. When I wrote a spam filter, it was picking up on capital letters. Like, that was the main thing it was looking for, But it doesn't tell you that. You just randomly write random stuff and just see which one's the most accurate. All right, there you go. So why did my loan get turned down? I didn't use a question mark. So, and all of the companies have been caught slanting things deliberately. Like, Facebook claimed that their news feed, their top 10 news stories, were all automatically determined. When people are sharing a news story, they go into like a top 10 news stories feed on Facebook. And as it turns out, that was a lie. It was not automatic. There was a group of users, super users at Facebook, that were curating the stories and putting stories that were aligned to their political biases up on the top 10. And Google if you look at the hits on Google, if you look at which links are favorable to Democrats and Republicans, Google tends to prioritize links favorable to Democrats on the top result, right? According to this study. Now, I replicated this study, and I got different results, which is interesting. I actually did it with this class, and I did it with my discrete math class, where I had them go and run search terms on different topics on Google and DuckDuckGo and other search engines, and rate the favorability towards Republicans and Democrats based on the hits, and I got different results. I didn't see any bias on the first hit, but there was an overall bias that way. So, spaghetti throwing, yeah, it's a technical term. you get a bucket of pasta, you throw it against the wall, and then I don't know that. But that's essentially how AI works. If you really want to know the sad truth about it, is that most of the time we have no idea why AI works. Think about the next time you're in a self-driving car. Usually we have very little idea how the thing actually works. We just have a random search space, and then we pick the results that work the best. Google and Facebook add fact checks. This story might not be accurate. Like I said, YouTube, I think, banned the person who made ivermectin for spreading misinformation on ivermectin, which is kind of hilarious. Right? Yeah. You want to learn about the source engine? I can't teach you about the source engine. I can tell you about Unreal Engine though. Sites that are untrustworthy get downranked. So they basically don't show up on the first couple pages. Facebook was caught curating who is trending. They have since apparently fired those people for putting their finger on the scale of democracy. And so, contra-wise, there have been a number of news stories over the last year that Facebook has actually been biased for Republicans because there was so much outrage over these stories that Facebook became afraid to censor Republicans as much as they thought they should be. And so the stories have been that Facebook has actually been biased for Republicans because of all the outrage. And again, somehow outrage is the appeal system, to censorship. Apparently that's how it works, Somebody deletes your news story, go to Congress and have an outrage against it. I don't know. All right, see you. Just one more thing. And so the government can also pressure corporations, right? Because it's usually a bad idea to piss off Congress if you're a corporation that wants to stay in business, right? They can make your life really miserable. And so WikiLeaks, which is Julian Assange's deal, was pressured by Joe Lieberman to cut off their payments to him. And so, sure, we're not censoring WikiLeaks, but if they can't get any money, if they go out of business, I don't know what to tell you. They just, just magic. I don't know. A judge ordered DNS service cut off, so if you went to wikileaks.org, it wouldn't work. Sure, the website's still up, you just can't access it. And so is that censorship? It's, so, abuse of power. Yeah. I mean, it's like somehow it's a clean hands theory, right? Like it wasn't me that blocked the payment processing to WikiLeaks. It was just, I asked them and they did it. So their hands are dirty, my hands are clean, And so, Julian Assange, of course, hid in the Ecuadorian embassy in London and then finally got arrested because the British government posted guards around the Ecuadorian embassy at the cost of millions and millions of pounds for years because he was leaking state secrets. And governments don't like it when you do that, as it turns out. So that's our next. That is our next discussion. Okay, so we're going to identify pros and cons really of corporate censorship, because it's not all bad, right? If somebody's advertising murderers for hire on Facebook, that probably should be censored. I don't know. See if so there'll be a discussion board up on this, and we'll do the same thing. You answer the bullet points, do the peer reviews. I think you know the drill at this point, but it's a very interesting topic, and I really hope you guys enjoy talking about this in the discussion boards, and it's fun for me to read your responses as well. Okay. Flag this content. Yeah, that is definitely a problem. If internet trolls can all click flag this content together and it gets deleted, and there's no appeal. X-Credit is due today. There is a Minecraft talk today at 4, and the essay on it is due in a week. So it's a hard deadline, soft deadline kind of thing. So I set the deadline at 4 so you know when it is, but then you can turn in up to 1 week after the workshop. And for some reason that bothers students because they think they're going to lose points. No, it's just how I have it set up so that it gets scheduled properly on Canvas. And then we'll do a meditation workshop on Sunday. All right. Peace out, you guys.